So we are in Philadelphia in front of the offices of Defined Hospitality. We're going to be talking to Al Lucas and Greg Root. That came on my radar by way of Eli Culp. Thank you again, Eli, being so generous through Network. I only give myself 1 hour before every episode to kind of familiarize myself with each restaurant group. And what excites me about talking to these two individuals, Greg and Al, is that they seem to be very operations oriented. At one point, they both held the title of Director of Operations for Starr Restaurant Group. So I'm assuming that they cross paths through Starr Restaurant Group. Stephen Starr is a kind of a legend here in Philadelphia. So it's always fun to see how success breeds success. And I'm curious to see how their strengths as two operation-geared individuals overlap. That's going to be really interesting. I'm interested in that. They have 6 concepts here in Philadelphia in this community. It seems to be an emerging community, so it'd be cool to kind of talk about how they got into this community and turning a community around. And I don't know if you guys can hear the screaming in the background, but I mean, they are on the edge of the city, and Philadelphia does kind of have a reputation for being in trouble as a city, so it's going to be interesting to get their perspective on how they're evolving and how they're lifting the city up. So I'm interested in that. 6 concepts: pizza, tacos, I think or just Mexican in general. Not really sure about those business models, so I'm going to pull back some layers. I'm excited for this. It's going to be good.
This episode is brought to you by Restaurant Systems Pro.
With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest partner at Defined Hospitality, Al Lucas. My man, Al, you're feeling unstoppable today.
I feel great.
I'm excited to be here. We got the privilege to enjoy your pizza spot. I'm afraid to say it because I've heard 2 different people say it differently.
Let's hear what you got.
It's not in front of me. It's Bidia?
Well, the official word is Bedia.
Bedia, sorry.
But I didn't even know that until 6 months of working with Joe, and someone corrected me, and I was like, Joe, why didn't you tell me your name's Bedia? He goes, I gave up a long time ago.
That's funny. So, I mean, the people were great. The food was delicious. Eli Culp put us in touch with you, and I have a lot of respect for Eli and what they're doing over there at High Street Hospitality. So if Eli is saying you got to talk to these guys, we got to talk to you. So I can't wait to dive into your story, to talk about how you got to where you are today. But let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with the success quarter mantra. What do you got for us?
Well, let's go up high. Jet pilots do not use rear view mirrors.
They do not. Why is that?
Because they're going forward and they're going fast.
That's a good point. So what is that? So what does that resonate with you? Why does that resonate with you?
Well, I think I think about that when I'm kind of getting slowed down and thinking about the problems and not the solutions. And if you talk about a problem 1,000 times, it doesn't mean you have 1,000 problems. It just means you chose to talk about it 1,000 times. And so, get in that airplane, get in that jet, and start flying.
Yeah, I mean, this quote I feel like is coming at such a great time. We literally just came from Wilmington, Delaware, where we connected with Tom Sterner, who's the author of It's Just a Thought, the mindful. I'm horrible with details, the titles of the books, but his whole thing is mindfulness and how to live intentionally, and that's a big part of it. Is what you said is you can't focus on. What was the key word you said?
Well, if you focus on one problem 1,000 times, you feel like you have 1,000 problems,
yes,
but you have one problem.
And you just get anxiety. You
Correct.
Focus on problems. All you do is think about trying to overcome those problems, and you just get lost in thought. But if you focus on solutions, focus on the process and being in the process to take one small bite at a time, all that anxiety kind of just goes away, and you get lost in the work. It's powerful
Absolutely,
stuff.
yeah. And then the get it started moment is when I also say, if it was easy, anybody would do it. So this is where you got to dig in with your team, dig in with your people, and get after these solutions.
Awesome stuff. Great way to get this thing started. So where does it make sense to start sharing your story?
Wow. Well, I mean, I'll be as brief as possible about the first 21 years because they were with one company that I literally started as a dishwasher and left as the vice president of the East Coast. And in between, it was a company called Chart House Restaurants, and it was started by the precursors to the Navy SEALs. It was 4 gentlemen that were part of UDT-1 and UDT-2, the underwater demolition teams that later became the Navy SEALs.
Okay.
So these were some serious guys. I mean, they were.
Talk about discipline.
Yeah, bingo, very disciplined. We had checklists for everything. But they were also tremendous outdoorsmen, sportsmen, surfers, skiers, sailors. And they had a real esprit de corps, and they were full of life. And they really developed a company that was built upon the principle of the Golden Rule. And so I was just surrounded by men and women at an age where, I needed some people to kind of look up to and set the way for me. So it was a wonderful, wonderful company for many, many years. And discipline and how to treat people and the pursuit of leadership is what really, I took forever. I've taken forever from that company, and still some of my very best friends and a wife.
So, I mean, they started a restaurant called the Chart House. So you had these SEALs that got together and say, we're passionate about food and beverage. Let's start a restaurant together.
Yeah.
What a amazing foundation of individuals to start a company. I feel like to make it to that level, to become a Navy SEAL in itself is so impressive, but to get a group of those people together to go accomplish something is like outside from being a SEAL is got to be something special.
Well, I had the really good fortune. The commander of UDT-1 was a gentleman by the name of John Callahan. We actually had and he was a big Irishman, and he was, everything you'd expect the big Irishman to be, full of life, wasn't afraid of a big goblet of beer or wine. And we even had a prime rib cut called the Callahan cut, named after him, which was this giant bone-in cut. And he told me many stories about his time in the service. And what was amazing about these guys is they were literally in life and death situations, and all they had, the first thing that came to mind when you think about them was what great sense of humors they have.
Right.
And he actually told me this amazing story about going to Vietnam before there was Vietnam to do this mapping project. And he said, they were scared. Everybody was scared. They're coming down this river, and they come around this corner, and there's another boat, and it's these Vietnamese. And they're like, he goes, they couldn't have been more than 14, 15 years old. And all of a sudden, he's telling everybody, hey, stand down. We don't want an incident here. And something happened. He goes, it was like a crack of a twig. And next thing you know, there were shots fired. And one of his guys is going, Captain, I've been hit. And he goes, oh, my God. He runs over to him, and he goes, it ended before it even started, but his guy had been shot. And he goes over to him, and he opens up his shirt, and he said, you're going to be fine. You're just going to be hungry. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, they got you right in the pork and beans. And he literally had a can of beans in his jacket, and that's where he got shot. So he was saved by Campbell's pork and beans.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
But you learned right away from these guys that they were unflappable, and but they were serious about the work, but they taught you how to, build a team and take life a little less serious.
So this was in the 80s?
It was 1979 when I started.
1979 when you started.
Yep.
Was it here that you realized this is what you wanted to spend your career doing?
Boy, that's a great question. It was kind of a slow. I never left. So until I left, which was 21 years, and I was an ex-athlete. I played some sports in high school and in college. And the thing about this resonated with me about the restaurant business was every day's new, and it requires a tremendous amount of teamwork, and it requires a lot of getting people in the right places. And so for me, that was just like a natural from being an athlete and from being on teams.
Leaning into people's strengths.
Correct. And the other part about that company was along the way, there was just so many people that saw more in me at the time than I saw in myself. And they helped lift me up. When I was a giant knucklehead, there were guys coming up to me and saying, hey, you have a knack for this, but you got to stop being such a goofball.
What do you mean by a goofball? What kind of stuff were you doing?
Well, I was a young guy traveling the country, opening chart houses, Aspen, Colorado, Monterey, Steamboat Springs, Mammoth Lakes. It was quite a lifestyle. And it was the early 80s when I was doing that. And so, you're working in a restaurant, it was a party atmosphere.
Right. Especially in the 80s and early 90s.
100%.
Yeah.
And so, I saw a lot of people get really sucked up into it in a way that they needed to leave the industry and really take account of themselves. And I was fortunate because I had some mentors that grabbed me and said, now you're coming in tomorrow morning early and you're going to do inventory with me and I'm going to show you things. And so they put me in a situation where I could really grow and mature and leave the party lifestyle in a way that leave it behind and start, developing a career out of this.
Yeah. Do you remember what they said when they pulled you aside and they said, "Hey, Al, you have, you're really good at fill in the blank."
Mm-hmm.
What was it that they were reinforcing in you?
Well, I think there was two things. First of all, what they were recognizing was that I worked hard, and I did it with a good attitude, that they could count on me to do the dirty work. And I was just not a person that was afraid of the dirty work. And I always just, I think a lot of that, I go back to my grandfather growing up. He was a steel worker in Youngstown, Ohio. And I always just thought, here's a guy that goes to work every day, never complains about anything, works around 1,000-degree heat, and, feeds his family and takes care of his family and never complains. And so there wasn't any job in the restaurant industry that I thought was ever going to be harder than being a steel worker in Youngstown, Ohio. So I had a good attitude about hard work and kind of the dirty work.
Yeah.
And so they recognized that in me. And then I like to have fun, but I also wanted to make sure that people around me had fun. So I think that those were the sort of baseline qualities that they saw in me that could resonate and work in the business.
Yeah, and there's definitely a correlation I've picked up on in all these interviews. The power of letting somebody know they're good at something. I don't think at a young age in our early 20s, late teens, even close to like our 30s, like we're not very self-aware. And what helps us become self-aware is the clues that life gives us, the what people say to you, they reinforce your strengths. But you have to reinforce these strengths. You have to let people know that they're good at something, because they may not. This puts you on a path, and we need to be seen too. What's going through your mind? I don't want to do it all the time.
Well, I think that you're hitting the nail on the head. And the first sort of tipping point moment was I was dishwashing in the Baltimore Chart House, and literally this was a place that would do 1,000 covers on a Saturday night, and that's a lot of dishes. And you're back there, and you were just taking it on the chin. And at the busiest part of the night, it was like 8:30 on a Saturday night, and the general manager comes down into the dish room, and he says, "Al, come with me." And I'm like, "Uh-oh, what did I do? This doesn't sound great." And he literally takes me from the dish room and brings me out into the dining room. It was a massive restaurant, 3 stories, and he takes me to the mezzanine level, which had this amazing view of the Baltimore Harbor, and it was amazing what was happening on that dining room floor. The energy was, you could just feel this energy. People were having a great time. Everyone was hustling. And he kind of put his arm half around me and said, "If you ever think your work doesn't matter, look out here. Because if there's one fork or one plate or one glass that hits that table that's dirty before the customer has it, then this slows down. And what's happening here is magical, and you're a part of it." And then he escorted me back to the dish room, and I cleaned another 500 dishes and went home. But what an amazing moment. And it's something that I never forgot in every level that I've been, because I've never seen it done that purposely anywhere else. There was this man that took the dishwasher out to say, "Hey, you matter."
Yeah, and just like every link in the chain has a role. But when you're in the back of a house, or if you're in dish pit, you never see the fruits of your labor, which it's important to show people. Look, you are just as important as every one of these people on this floor. How'd that make you feel?
Well, at that point, it made me feel. I understood the importance of teaching people the bigger picture, because he was showing me the bigger picture, and he was investing in me. So there was it was a big lesson in a lot of ways that, I'm telling this story 30 years later, so it mattered.
Yeah, Simon Sinek's words start with why come to my mind, and people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. But as a dishwasher, that why, you have to see it to believe it. I feel like, it's a bigger picture. Your work matters. When you left the Chart House in 2001, you were the vice president of operations. So you went from dishwasher to vice president of operations over 22 year?
20, yeah, about 22 years.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Man. This is your first job in the restaurant
First
industry?
job.
Holy moly. So how many, I gotta be honest, this is the first time of me ever hearing about the Chart House, but it sounds like it was an amazing organization.
Yeah, I think that it's owned by a gigantic restaurant company now. The billion-dollar buyer owns them, Landry's Seafood, Tillman Fertitta. But along the way, those early days, there's nothing like it. You can still go on Facebook, and there's old Chart House employee Facebook pages where people, they're doctors, lawyers, all walks of life, teachers, and they still talk so fondly on a daily basis about their experiences with Chart House. Certainly nothing like it that I've experienced. And it's also sort of always resonated with me if I had the opportunity to have my own company, that those values I'd like to bring them forward.
Specifically, what values?
Well, the baseline that how much of a priority people are. And that's just not the customer, because it's the employee, it's your team, it's your vendors, it's your postman, it's everybody. Everybody plays a role in that. Your air conditioner, try to run a restaurant when your air conditioner's down. Try to run a restaurant when your plumbing's backing up. You'll know exactly how important your plumber is at that point. And if you've done it right along the way, they're going to be there for you. And they have been time and time again, if that is your core value. And so that's the top of it for us, is people are the priority. Nick and Greg, my partners at Defined, we've adopted that as one of our core values, and they're all in on it. So Chart House to me framed that because I saw it work.
So when you left in 2001, how many locations were there?
I believe it was 63.
63. How many locations were there in 1979?
Let's see. Baltimore was 35. So when the day I started, it was 35.
So this was a pretty significant organization.
Yeah, it was. Yep.
What was your evolution? Because you went from dishwasher to vice president of operations for the entire organization, 60 plus locations.
Yes.
What was your evolution?
Well, it was, first of all, there was a path for it. And it might sound crazy, but I don't think there was a vice president or the president of the company at the time that I worked there that didn't have the same path I did. They were all dishwashers. As a matter of fact, I remember I was a general manager. It was probably 1993 or so, 94, and we were having a year-end meeting, and the company had hired this motivational speaker, and he kind of didn't do his homework because he was in this big auditorium, and he asked the question, how many of you started out as a server? And he kind of raises his hand expecting to see if arms go up, and not a single hand went up. And he was like a little dumbfounded he stuttered. And somebody yelled out from the back of the room, how about dishwasher? And he goes, okay, I'll bite. How about dishwasher? And next thing you know, there was a sea of arms up. And so literally the culture was, even if you were being hired as a server, you started in the dish room. So the company was built on that. And the idea is that you had empathy and understanding of everyone's job in the restaurant. And so that was how the company was built and designed. And it's, go back to the Navy SEALs. You ran in the mud with everybody else, whether you were the commander or the newest guy in. And so that was the philosophy that allowed you, if you did the work and did the learning and stuck with it, you could move up the ranks.
Yeah, and I mean, just the power of giving people opportunity. What does that do? From going from dishwasher to server to, I don't know what the natural progression was, but what effect does that have on people?
Well, first of all, it lets everyone see that it's not a top-down organization, and it's a very collaborative organization. And I think there's not a person in there that can't ask themselves the question, why not me? And to me, if that's the organization, why not me? Why not me take this opportunity? Why not me work for this opportunity? Why not me set goals? That's pretty powerful, because, you talk to a ton of people in different organizations, and, they feel like there's such barriers in so many ways on a day-to-day basis that you could see people, become disenchanted with their organization because of that.
Growth is a human need. I think people forget that. It's right there below self-actualization, at the peak of just your human needs. It's, if you can tap into personal growth, that is going to help your people feel so fulfilled. So, yeah. I feel like if you start everybody at a low place, like, you can kind of naturally tap into that like constant progression, and I mean, you're also, like you said, it's just doing that gives so much, I don't know, perspective. Like you said, everyone's position, and how every role fits into the bigger picture. It's so powerful.
It's a great jumping off point from Chart House, though, because growth is growth comes with learning and trying to find new things to do and learn. And my next position, ironically, was a company, after working 21 years with basically the same food, the same approach, I was cast in an entirely different situation because I became the first director of operations for Stephen Starr.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to talk about that. I do want to. I can only imagine you grew so much as a professional in this 20 plus years working with the Chart House. So what was in this time, in this evolution, what was the hardest part for you going from dishwasher to VP? Where do you think you struggle the most?
Well, I think that part of the biggest struggle that I had was that we had such a defined culture, and because of there was a lot of pressure on the executives of the company to grow the company because it became a public company. Our culture fragmented, and we had a new constituent called a shareholder, the market, and that changed a lot of our approach to our businesses. And so how we deployed capital became really important to grow the company with that capital. But we were also at the same time an aging company that had taken great pride in doing these architectural and often monumental renovations in very special places.
Did you say agent company?
Aging. It started aging, yes. So, for example, the Boston Chart House was a warehouse, but it was the first office that John Hancock worked out of. The Chart House in Baltimore was an old power plant. Across from the Hotel del Coronado was the Coronado Boathouse. That was renovated to become a Chart House. So there was a lot of things that we did that made the company really special, architecture being one of them and site location. But as we were aging as a company, because the company started in 1961, a lot of that capital was needed for those restaurants. And so we had two kind of tail of the tape. What do we do with our money? Well, the street, the market, the open market wants us to grow the company. That's why people are buying stock in it. But we needed money for the other restaurants to keep them looking sharp as they aged. And often they're in a place of high level of weather. San Juan, Puerto Rico, St. Thomas, Miami, you're getting things like hurricanes. Yeah. In the mountains, Aspen, Colorado, snow every year. Those things make buildings deteriorate much quicker. Montara, California, giant surf. Yeah. Malibu, Cardiff by the Sea. So we're in the elements, one of the special parts of it. But at the same time, it beat the company up. Yeah. So I was at a vice president at the time when these decisions were becoming more and more difficult, and I saw decisions being made. We were making decisions. I was part of it, that we were hopefully going to grow the company, but I also saw some deterioration of our core values and our culture.
So that's a very common struggle. Were you trying to overcome that struggle, or for you was the overcoming of that struggle to go someplace else?
That's a great question. For me, it was time for me to go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And, there were some significant things that happened that, I'd really lost some confidence and lost the sense of trust that I had in the people that I'd worked for so many years. And so, it felt like the right time to go and learn something new and take what I'd learned from Chart House and bring it somewhere else that I thought could benefit from it.
So you lost trust because the priority became the shareholders, not the organization.
Correct. Yeah.
How do we overcome that?
Well, it's leadership. And I think that it is an understanding that sometimes a quarterly report, I understand the pressure of it, but I believe also that if you're really upfront about what your plans are and what your needs are, and you're just not painting yourself as a growth story, but part of that story is telling the truth to the public that we also have these other capital needs. And I think if you get in front of it, people just want to know what the real story is. Yeah. People don't want to feel hoodwinked. Yeah. And though everybody gets excited about the new shiny toy, including a new restaurant, and make no mistake, it was fun to open restaurants. Yeah. And I was proud of that to do so. But if you're not taking care of your core businesses, well, how do you think those employees are feeling about their restaurant when, the door's coming off its hinges and, you need new gaskets at your reach-ins, and you don't have them. And I think that the sense of pride starts to diminish at that point.
Right.
So I think, I've never been the CEO of a public company, so I've never sat in that chair, and so it's kind of easy for me to say. But that would be to answer your question, my perspective would be, I think you need more transparency.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it all the time. We see these companies go down, and you realize it's all because of a lack of transparency, and they didn't keep their promise.
Yeah, I mean, I could keep on going, but we still have so much career. I mean, we still got 20 years
Ooh.
of career to cover in your story, in your timeline. So where was Stephen Starr's restaurant group in 2001? Paint the picture of that company and what it looked like when you came in.
Well, he had 5 restaurants at the time, 6 restaurants, pardon me, and a couple key people working with him. And ironically, I met Stephen Starr through a headhunter that I'd worked with in Chart House days. And so here I was living. I live in Narberth, so I'm in the area. He had Continental Old City, which was this smash hit. But the real launching, I think that launched the company in a lot of ways. But the real big hit when he started to kind of spread his wings and bring sort of this New York vibe to Philly. I think Stephen is definitely a guy that says, why not me? Why not us? Was Budokan. And so Budokan was open and flourishing. And I think that's when all the eyes went upon him. And then about the time he opened Pod out in University City, out at University of Pennsylvania, that's when he and I started talking. And so he had 5 restaurants and then had some openings coming. And I joined the company when he was under construction at Alma de Cuba, Morimoto, and Jones. They were basically all kind of almost simultaneously under construction in some fashion. And so he knew he needed to build his infrastructure. And believe me, I was not his vibe in a lot of ways. Here was this guy that came from one company. He was looking to build this very dynamic, multi-concepted company that had, LA, New York City aspirations that, hey, we can compete with anybody. And he was getting to know me, who had worked for one company, the Navy SEALs. We didn't even, I didn't even love the Beatles. He loves the Beatles. I was more of a Stones guy. And so we had more reasons not to get along than get along. But Stephen's very smart in that way, because he knew if he was going to grow his company successfully, I think he also recognized he needs somebody that would think a little different and challenge him in a way that is respectful and healthy, all the while knowing that he's going to forge ahead in a big way.
So what was different about the way you thought?
Well, first of all, I had the systems. Second of all, I was disciplined on my daily operations. So I knew how to start thinking about the restaurant before I got to the restaurant, and I knew how to be really efficient with my time and go in there and ensure that it was all systems go by the time we raised the curtain for the customers. And I was very good at that. Secondly, I had the human resource piece, the team building piece, and the developmental piece. I had a strong track record of building teams, and a lot of people got promoted from the teams that I built and that we built. And so, I had a good understanding of what that took and what really interested people. And I think that was something that, Stephen, very entrepreneurial, very do-it-yourself, one restaurant at a time. And so I I was able to start bringing in this sense of a little more strategy around those elements, around the operations, around the team building.
So is team building something that you think can be taught, or is that like an innate ability that you're born with to be able to see strengths in people and put them in the right path? And like what is involved with being a good team builder? Well,
I think that teams have to be built. I think certain people have instincts about leadership and team building, but you look at it. It's why every team has a coach. And coaches are developed, and not all coaches are successful. And so I think that there's so much that goes into just that aspect of becoming a team builder. There's a career right there. public speaking, it's psychology, it's philosophy. There's so many of the soft skills that can be learned along the way. And most importantly, learning that people will react to you differently. And you turn that around, and then you really start thinking about, what is it that this person needs to be successful? And no two people are the same. So if you are a student of that, then you're on your way to becoming a coach and a team builder.
What are the 3 most critical elements or abilities to be a team builder?
Well, I think you have to use both ears. So many times people think that coaching is, we see it on the other end. It seems like they never shut up. But I think that the really good ones spend about 5 times more listening than they do actually speaking. And so I think it starts there. I think secondly is, how do you build trust? And so by building trust, that means that you're putting yourself in a position where people want to go in the direction.
How do you build trust, though?
Well, I think that there again it's that you listen, because so often, people start a job and people are going to bark out orders. I think that allowing people to feel a part of it and constant follow-up. I think one of the things that I did early on at Star Restaurants, even the newest anybody, I would make sure that I was getting with on a weekly basis to make sure they were feeling comfortable in their training. And, the company wasn't so big that I wasn't not able to achieve that. I was able to achieve it because I was disciplined about it. So by me doing that, all the managers in the company saw, wow, he shows up and talks to these new people all the time. And then the other part is when I tell people very specifically, hey, when I come in and ask, hey, how's it going? I follow that up by saying, by the way, this is not a rhetorical question. When I come in and say, hey, how's it going? This is your opportunity. And so I follow that up with some reading the body language. And I might ask that question 2 or 3 more times if I have a body language read that says something's off. So I've learned that if you ask the question 3 times, you'll see that the answers start to come. They start to flow. So when people see that now you've listened, and then they see follow-up, and you actually follow up with someone, it doesn't always mean you're going to give them the answer they want. However, you might come back to them and go, I thought about what you said. We're still going to do it this way, and I hope you can stay on board with me. Let's see this through, but I do appreciate your feedback. It says a lot, because you're not going to be able to just act on everyone's thought or opinion.
All right, so I'm taking notes as you're going. You're dropping gold, by the way. I'm loving what you're giving us. The question was, what are the 3 elements of team building? You said listening, trust, and I'm going to say recognition.
Thank you. You make me sound smarter than I am.
No, man, you made it. It was beautiful. And one of the key lessons I've learned about trust. Stephen R. Covey has a son. I can't remember his middle initial, but he's also Stephen. He wrote the book, The Speed of Trust. And in that book, he says just the best way to get trust is to give trust. And I feel like that was like in between. Like I kind of saw it in between the lines of what you were saying, but would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I think that's so critical, what you're saying, and that's true of almost anything. It's, I guess a really popular word is manifesting. Well, it's a popular word for a reason, because you can manifest trust or distrust, and you're going to do it in a fashion. You're going to do it very quickly, by the way. So you don't get a lot of you don't get a lot of swings at trust.
It takes years to build, seconds to lose. Correct.
And so be very careful about that. But I think that I have a nature that I believe in people, and I think that they have room, and so they can only violate my trust by doing something illegal, immoral. Those are like, you got all your strikes out at once. Making mistakes is the opportunity I was given in Chart House, was to make mistakes, and I made a plenty. And but they weren't immoral, they weren't illegal, and so they were supported. And when people learn those lessons and realize, oh my goodness, I'm okay, I'm safe here, even when I make a mistake, that goes a long way.
Yeah. When I speak to guests who are as good at communicating and is when I'm really getting into the conversation, I have this habit of drilling down and getting as much detail as possible because I know you have it, and I want to make sure we give as much detail to your previous career as your current career. What's going on? I mean, it was all one career, but I want to talk about what you have with Defined Hospitality. So I'm going to zoom up to 30,000 feet and give the big picture real quick, because you were with Starr for 3 years, then you went and you worked with Cozy Inc. You were there for 3 years, and then you went back to Starr Restaurant Organization for another almost 6 years, from 2008 to 2013, and then you had about a 2-year stint with Chief Operating Officer at Jose Tejas in Border Cafe. Really great organizations there. I recognize those. And then OTG Management. So that was 2019. You left OTG. So where does it make sense? That's the kind of the big picture of where you've been and what you've done. Why did you leave Starr and come back? What was going on there?
Well, quite frankly, I was made an offer I couldn't refuse with Cozy. Yeah. And Cozy was an interesting one because I think about those experiences. Each one of them are just like absolute diamonds in my life for what I learned and what I was able to bring forward, especially to Defined Hospitality. So the reason why I left was there was 2 people that I worked with at Chart House that joined that organization, and the company was in a lot of trouble and kind of a mess. And there was a strategic plan to basically replace all the leaders and bring in a new team. And it was growing, but at the same time, there was actually a lawsuit against the originators of the company at the time.
You're talking about Chart or Cozy?
This is Cozy.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Yep. And so it looked like a really good, to me, an opportunity to work with some people that I knew, loved, and trusted.
So these are people that you met at Chart who are now part of Cozy.
That's correct.
That's where I got
Yep.
this. Okay.
Yep. And so I jumped over there, and there was one gentleman who was the president of the company who was actually had a fast food background, and he was a strategic genius. I'd never seen anything like it. How he approached the problem was unbelievable. So that experience was amazing to work with him closely as he approached the problem of Cozy and how he rebuilt it in a meaningful way at that time. So I took a lot from it, and I gave a lot. I worked really hard, traveled, did a lot of things. I had a young family. The one thing that I learned about that experience was I didn't love the market segment, the fast casual. I was really missing, and because being fast casual, it's fast everywhere, like every moment of the day. Whereas in, the sort of full service sit down dining experience that I was accustomed to, there was a lot more time to build relationships, at least towards my style. Mm-hmm. I know that there's people that are incredibly successful, that are great leaders and great communicators in that market segment, but I could see I wasn't going to be one of them. And so I think I helped in a big way, rebuild some teams, got some of the things that we wanted to accomplish in Cozy, but I knew in my heart, my gut, it just wasn't a day-to-day work experience with the customer and with the staff that really got me fired up.
Did you recognize this? Like, was it hard for you to figure out what the struggle was, to put words to the struggle, this feeling you were having, or was it pretty clear that this is this disconnect?
It became really clear to me very quickly. And one of the things strategically was happening, Cozy was like this really cool little idea. I used to eat at Cozy's and Zando coffee, and it was this more organic thing. A lot of the food was scratch. We're baking bread. It was this really, it was tailored after the Cozy sandwich shop in Paris. It's a great story. So the story was romantic, and from working even just those 3 years with Starr, food started to become really more important in my life. Not just the restaurant company like Chart House, but food, different cuisines. So I'd started to really grow. And what became part of the strategy was Cozy was going to become a franchise model. And with that, the gentleman who was president, he came from a fast food background, and so what we were trying to do was standardize everything. And so instead of grilling chicken, we were buying grilled chicken. I saw the product change to become more standardized, so it could be a franchise tool. And that just, hey, I understood the plan, but it just wasn't. My heart wasn't in that.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, that's why we have core values. That's why we have visions. That's why, so people can get on board. And if you're not on board with that, now you know, and that you're, by getting people off board sooner, you're doing yourself as an organization, justice.
Yeah, big time. And I was making a lot of money.
Yeah. But at the end of the day,
my wife's like, "Are you sure?"
I mean, but we're learning. The more we learn about human behavior and what it takes to be happiness, like, you will never have enough money. It's like a drug. The more you get, the more you need.
Yeah.
Because you will just acclimate to whatever level of how much you have, and that becomes normal. It will.
Yeah. The thing about that is, that was an itch.
Yeah. I was kind of trying. I was like,
yeah.
To be sneaky over here.
What's
if you're watching the video,
I wish my opening quote was "Save the raise." Right. You start working. If you live on that the rest of your life and just save the raise, you're gonna have all the money you need. But that's not how it works. You're right.
Like they did a study, and this number is probably on a sliding scale, but the average household to achieve happiness and a sense of security. Really, the trick is achieving a sense of security. And once you have security, that's really, after that, like, you can make billions and you'll never truly be happy. But I think it's $80,000 a year or something like that. Once you hit that point, it's just like, what's the point to make more?
Yeah.
And at most restaurants, I feel like for management, we can hit that's a goal that I think is achievable.
Sure.
Maybe not for everybody right now, but I think it's within reach within our lifetimes.
I agree. I think that happiness level is very attainable in being a restaurant chef and manager.
So before we move on to why you went back to Starr, I'm curious. You said that this gentleman was a strategic genius. What did you learn about strategy? What were you not aware about, and what did he put on your radar?
Great question. I think, first of all, he was a master of time management in a meaningful way. And I can tell you, he didn't micromanage. He expected his executives to do their job and bring their expertise. I would have a monthly meeting with him. At some point, it got to a monthly meeting where initially I was meeting with him once a week. And I think once he sort of saw that, I had an appetite for work and getting stuff done, I had more and more rope. But I would literally go to his office. It started in Manhattan, and we moved the corporate offices to a suburb of Chicago. And he would literally meet me at the door at his office, exactly on time. He would bring me in, and as he's ushering me in, we'd be talking sports while we're walking to the chairs. We would talk family, sports till we got to the chairs for 5 minutes, catch up on family for 5 minutes, and then we'd do business for 50 minutes. And with you could almost, there was a scoreboard clock behind him, and he'd literally be taking notes, and with 10, 9, 8, all the way down to 0, he'd spin to his back of his desk, put the Al Lucas folder away, lock it, and walk me to the door. And so he was the master of time management. He did not flitter away a moment. And then the other thing, so that was one thing. I watched that. And so why is that important? Well, he's managing a big organization. He has marketing. He has finance. I mean, it's a big organization. And you'll see how this comes back to Starr now. So I got I had a front row seat for that. Secondly, and he had a book on everything. Every department, he had categorized what the goals were, and he ran masterful executive meetings. And I just remember one quote to him. He goes, "Al, honestly, when you're this high up in a company, you could be selling toilet seats. You're an executive now. You're managing people from a high level." And so it was great wisdom in terms of organizationally a mindset. But of course, it also at the same time was feeding my thing that, boy, I never expected to be a chain restaurant vice president. So that led me back to Starr.
Got it. So 2008, you're back with Starr. when you left Star, did you kind of leave the door cracked open a little bit with like the idea that maybe you would want to come back, or were they hiring for like you're a director of operations, and then when you came back, you were vice president of operations?
Right. Yeah.
So, did they just know how good you were, and when they found out you were back on the market, they said,
Well, Stephen and I are, I consider Stephen and I are friends, and we don't talk all the time, but we talk. When we talk, it's like, we're working together.
Yeah.
I mean, we could probably have a weekend of a podcast of just my time with Stephen, but we always stayed in contact, and so I put my feelers out there with Stephen specifically, and he had some things going on, and it was perfect timing for both of us, and it was really interesting to come back because I'd seen there'd been some really smart people that were in the positions that I were in that had come and gone, but they'd made some significant changes to the company, which I thought were phenomenal. In a lot of ways, what I would have done if I would have stayed, I saw executed extremely well by some very smart people.
can you get into that?
Yeah, I think first of all, the HR department became more robust, and Stephen, I think that people really showed Stephen that there's more risk in not having a robust, smart HR department than he recognized at the time for a guy that wanted to really grow his company. And I think that those people were ahead of the curve in terms of how is that organization going to treat people? Because Stephen, when the master entrepreneur, when he was frustrated with how things were going, he would reel it back into and try to take care of it himself, which becomes more and more difficult as you're growing a company. So it was this sort of mentality: nobody can do it better than me, and he would permeate the organization. But there were some people that really convinced him that it wasn't going to help him do his best work, what he's great at for the organization, and B, there's just inherent risk in always having issues come back to him to solve. So I think that's one aspect. Secondly, it became, I think, the thing I saw that I actually started, I was very proud of, was P&L reviews with the general managers. And a funny story was, I said to Stephen early, this is my first stint, hey, I want to sit down and review the P&Ls with the general managers and the chefs. And they had never done that. So there was no transparency to the actual results. And one of the things I learned early on is when managers and chefs and sous chefs, assistant managers, one of the things they want to learn is, how does the business run?
Yes.
And in a restaurant company like Charthouse, it was total transparency. The scoreboard was always lit. It wasn't the most important thing every day, but we knew what the score was.
You need your scorecard.
Correct.
You need to know how you're performing.
Exactly right. And Stephen's line was, it was great. He said to me, then they're going to see how much money we make, and they're going to steal from us. And I said, Stephen, they're already stealing from us. And he said, are they? And he got all paranoid. I go, I don't know yet. Let's review the P&Ls. I'll tell you later. And after we started that process, existing restaurants, the number was pretty astronomical of our profit improvements in 1 year, just by going through the P&Ls.
I want to drill down on that, but I'm curious. Like, what were the keys? You said HR, like everything you would have done was done in the time you were gone. You came back, and they were making the progress you would have made. What was missing in the HR that was there when you came back? How did they evolve that?
I think, well, first of all, Stephen's belief in the need for HR. Everything starts there.
Okay.
Right? Why do we need HR? I think he wanted to grow the company. Well, HR includes a lot of things: onboarding, recruiting, compliance, legal compliance, training. So he understood now HR was a much more robust thing versus, somebody's upset and we got to have a chat with them. That, in his mind, that's all HR was, is, make sure everyone's happy, even when someone's unhappy. So I think that, I saw that he was convinced, because Stephen, he does his homework, and and he'll eventually, when it resonates with him, when he has that silent little moment and he has his aha moment, he'll go all in. And so I think that that's what happened.
Yeah. So I mean, so it sounds like there was a culture there, but HR is putting system, process to culture and training and like all those things, and really protecting yourself too, because
Sure.
at the end of the day, if you're not covering your butt with HR, it's much more likely that a lawsuit will hit your
Yeah,
case
I
if
mean,
you're
it's
wrongful firing or unlawful firing or whatever it might be.
correct.
Wrongful termination, I think that's the key word.
Wrongful
Yeah,
termination. And trust me, Stephen doesn't want that.
Yeah, and the more money you make, the more enticing it becomes for people to knock you down a peg because they know you got it.
Yeah, that's certainly. There's certain people have that mentality.
It's not most people, but they exist out there. But as you get bigger, you have more to lose.
100%.
Yeah.
And people become more cynical of you.
Yeah, and like we talked about earlier, it takes one bad press release to lose the trust with a city that you spent years building trust with. So I think we can move on from there. But P&L, and the other big part is open book management is what I'm getting from you, the power of open book management. How did this move the needle, open book management?
Well, it did a few things. First of all, people recognized that their day-to-day habits mattered. Simple things like air conditioning that is turned down at night when there's no one in the restaurants, designing restaurants that had automatic light turn off and walk-ins, things like that. Why have a light on all night in a walk-in?
So what happens? What do you gain when you bring the team in on these narratives?
Well, I think that is us keeping that promise to them of we're going to show you how to be a better business person.
So they start seeing your business like their business.
Correct.
And then what ends up happening is it's the opposite of death by 1,000. It's life by 1,000 cuts, and you get these different perspectives you would have never otherwise gotten because you're opening yourself up. You're making a team of owners, and every person on your team is intelligent. They have a level of their own genius, their own perspective. And when you open yourself up to that potential energy, it's like having infinite entrepreneurs on your team.
Bingo. And Stephen's the P&L review, it's very interesting you say it in that fashion. I mean, we're recruiting the best of the best. And so all of a sudden now we're creating this environment. It wasn't just us saying, hey, we need to turn the lights off. We were bringing in people that had great experiences elsewhere, and they go, hey, have you thought about this? When I was at X company, we did this, and it saved us, $12 a day. Well, $12 a day times 365 times 24 restaurants, that becomes a significant idea. Mm-hmm. And so now everyone feels free and energized by participating in these measures that make it a better company.
But it becomes a game, because we talked about earlier with Charthouse the importance of a scorecard.
Mm-hmm.
People don't know what their effort amounts to, and when they can see that their effort can move a needle, and if you gamify that, and if you can find a way to gamify that and compete between shifts or whatever it is, now there's something that happens there. It goes from being a job and going through motions to being somebody who can contribute.
Right. Yeah. I think that's important. People say, if you had to give me one, people would ask me this as they go to Starr, and even in our organization now, what's one piece of advice you could give me? I said, I will tell you, think about your day as an owner, and if you want to be then you will become an owner, and it's magic if you do that.
Yeah. So you spent another 6 years away from Starr before coming to or joining Define Hospitality. Mm-hmm. Define started in 2016, correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
So you came later on.
Yes.
What's worth talking about between, I guess I should ask, why did you leave Starr a second time? I mean, it sounds like you wanted to go back, and what was the reason for getting away a second time?
Well, the second time was, again, I was made an offer. I was recruited heavily to be the chief operating officer, and I thought that we had done an amazing job of opening restaurants with Starr, and La Diplomat in Washington, D.C. was sort of my last opening, and it was a resounding hit, and I think it just had its 10-year anniversary, something I'm very proud of our team to this day at Starr, that we opened that restaurant. There was a part of me at this point where, first of all, I wanted to own. I was I'd approached every day like an owner, and I wanted to own, and I was given an opportunity to be an owner in Jose Tejas Border Cafe. And the other part I was looking at in that organization in particular was it was a pretty unfettered position to be the chief operating officer. And I felt like it was going to really afford me the opportunity to really test my full philosophies on leadership. The way the organization, it was a small organization with an owner that didn't want to be in operations on a day-to-day basis. And so I really saw an opportunity to go there and say, you know what, this is going to be a real test of me and my leadership. At the end of the day, and I say this with all respect, it was Stephen's company. And I know he would tell you that I had a huge impact in it. And I'm proud of that. And I was proud to work with him. But it was his company.
What were you missing?
I think that the buck stops right here.
So what do you mean by that?
That every decision that there was always, the buck stopped with Stephen.
Yeah.
And
So at the end of the
and that
day,
was plain and simple.
If you didn't agree, he was the shot caller.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it
And I wouldn't, and I don't blame him.
well, what about, so is it just the fact that you couldn't be the final decision maker?
A little more than that. I think it was also that he led the organization, and I was a big part of that. I wanted to see if I could lead an organization.
I mean, I hate to use the word ego, but was it ego based?
Ego.
Yeah. But at the same time, ego is it carries such negative I always want to say condensation, which is not the right word. Condonation. Did I say it right? I'm always afraid I'm going to spit that out wrong. Connotation. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. But we all have ego.
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to realize that, like, if you say you don't have an ego, you're full of shit. Because it's a part of being human that we have this identity, this narrative, this story, this idea of who we are. That's our ego, and it's important that we're seen, and that we're recognized for the work we do. We want to be seen. It's one of those human needs that I was talking about earlier. Is it's right above security, is being recognized, being loved, being seen. So it's only natural. I don't think it's a dirty thing to feel this way. It's human nature.
Yeah. That's one way of looking at it, and it's certainly ego plays in it. But you said something very early in our conversation about growth, that we all have a desire to continue to grow.
Yeah.
And so in this situation, it was certainly ego was involved, but it was really an opportunity for me to grow. And so if I was really lining it up, I had a great job. My wife was super upset when I was leaving Star Restaurants. She's like, "Are you nuts?" She loves.
This is a recurring theme.
Yeah,
like,
when
what
I
are
leave,
you doing?
Yeah. It's funny. It was like you worked one place for 21 years, and now you you change anytime you feel like it. But I would still grow at Star, but it was an expansion of the same. And my personal incremental growth I saw starting to diminish, and so I really looked at it as an opportunity for me to really spread my wings in a bigger way.
So you were almost getting disenchanted by not having that ability to be the final call, or like the shot caller, the puck stop.
Yeah, I just felt that I wasn't growing in a fashion that made me feel vital.
Got it. So when you left Star the second time, you ended up with Jose Tejas and Border Cafe. You had ownership, because it says chief operating officer. Was it like a
I was a partner.
sharing?
Yeah, I was a partner.
Got it. 1 year, 8 months.
Yeah.
What happened with this partnership?
I'll tell the story.
Okay, that's what we're.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
So we were looking at growing the company, and we had a game plan. And part of my job was to strengthen the restaurant managers. Every management team was very undermanned. And I accomplished that in a big way. And I was also looking at providing some infrastructure to the company that would allow us to grow from there. And that's where the real incentive for me to join the company was. And I think that when I looked around the company, I saw sort of a lack of any diversity whatsoever. And I had a key person that was amazing talent, and brought some. And it just happened to bring diversity, which I didn't know till I met them. And after I had several conversations, and I think that the people that were that I worked with, they weren't interested in diversity.
When you're saying diversity, you're saying diversity among the people working there, or
Yeah, people of color.
got it.
Yeah, and so that's when I knew immediately that this was the wrong organization for me.
Got it. Well, I'm happy you found out fast.
Yeah.
Know?
It was great
So
to find out.
When
Fast.
something makes you a partner, I mean, does that like muck you up the waters with legal situations? Like they give you equity, then you got to sell your equity back. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it was. You know what? There wasn't anything that significant in that manner. It was pretty. We had a smart agreement, smart on both sides.
What made it smart?
The fact that it was really clear what I was vested in and what my walk away would be.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest benefit, in my opinion, about a partnership agreement is the exit. Is if things happens more often. Partnerships don't work out more often than they do work out. So when they don't work out, you need to go into that partnership with the expectation that it's almost not going to work out. So if it doesn't, there's no issues. You can walk away, and it's clear from the beginning what's going to happen if it doesn't work out.
Yeah,
Is that what you did?
Yeah, it was really simple and gentlemanly and handshake, and there wasn't any animosity whatsoever. It was a really clean break.
Got it. Is it worth talking about OTG?
Yeah, it was great.
Okay, so you were there for 3 years.
Yeah, it was a mountain of work, something I never envisioned for myself. And ironically, I went to work with them with a co-vice president that I worked with at Starr Restaurants for many years. And he was the vice president, and we did, there was a big vision to build these restaurants in airports that were really out of the norm, and that the quality of the food, the service, the experience was, elevated from our normal everyday airport experience. And so it was a ginormous job with big aspirations. I spent literally 2 years up at the Newark airport, opened 30-some concepts, built teams, met amazing people. Some of the hardest work I've ever done. There's so many hurdles and difficulties in building a restaurant and staffing a restaurant. You throw in an airport environment where people have to go through background checks, and you might hire somebody and they don't get their background check for 6 weeks. Well, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to get a job.
Right.
I think that,
I mean, especially in the restaurant industry, people who are looking for jobs in this industry don't have 6 weeks to wait.
Correct. Yeah. And so we did some really big stuff and big work, and I met some great people. I've built and our team grew, and I had a lot of fun. And one of the things that we did at OTG, which was cool, is that we would partner with local celebrity chefs to build concepts. And so I also expanded my Rolodex of who I got to meet, and went down to Houston, did the same thing. There was a new terminal built down at the Houston airport, George Bush Airport, from the ground up, and OTG won the contract for that, and we made a huge footprint down there and did some absolutely stunning work. Chris Shepard, a chef from Houston of great merit, was just here in Philadelphia, ate in one of our restaurants. I've seen him the last 2 years as he's come in for the chef conference here. And those are just relationships that I met for that opportunity with OTG. And the other thing about OTG, it was a very tech-heavy company, which is certainly not my strength. And so that forced me to learn a lot more about technology, not only in the moment, but potentially where it was going.
I mean, a great time to learn about technology because that sets you up for COVID.
Yeah, and that was 100%. And, we sort of have this sort of IT moment in our company where if Al can do it, anybody can do it. So it's probably
if I was in the company, it would be if Eric can do it, anybody can do it.
Yeah.
So I get you, man.
Right.
I break technology. Technology does not like me, but I manage. So you mentioned something, and it's more of like I might just, I'm going to sit on this question. I'm going to make a note. We'll bring it back because it kind of struck a vein, but I want to make sure we spend time to talk about what you got going on with Defined Hospitality. So we're going to take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll be right back to get into Defined Hospitality and how this opportunity came to your attention.
We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that right now, Restaurant Systems Pro is offering a no strings attached 60-day trial that will help you improve your systems, increase your profit, and find better work-life balance. All you have to do is click the link below.
We are back, and the year on your timeline now is 2019. Why did you leave OTG?
Well, I left OTG to come work with Greg Root and Nick Kennedy and Define Hospitality.
So what happened? Were you headhunted, or were you just through the grapevine? You heard that they were looking for somebody?
Well, it started in 2002.
Okay.
I hired Greg Root as an assistant manager at Jones Restaurant.
Okay.
So this wasn't a foreign organization to me. Greg and I had worked together for quite some time.
I did see the overlap at Star Restaurant, so I was curious about that.
And then one of our partners in Define Hospitality is Roland Cassis, who's is a big developer here in Fishtown. And as a matter of fact, Soraya, really the flagship restaurant, is the namesake of his grandmother. And in many ways, his vision that Greg and Nick Kennedy executed. But I'd known Roland for years because he was often in the Star restaurants, and I had a corner office, and right outside the corner office was the waiting area, and he was often there hours waiting to have meetings with Stephen. And so I got to know Roland. And fast forward, Greg is the general manager of Pod Restaurant, and he comes to me, I'm the vice president, and says, hey, I'd like another opportunity here. I've been here a few years and really have an itch to do something new. And I said, well, you've never opened a restaurant, and there's no experience like it. You should really consider that. And we have this beer garden that we're going to be opening in Fishtown, Frankfurt Hall, and you should really give that some thought. Going through an opening, I know you're coming from a sushi restaurant, a lot of moving parts, kind of a sexy place. It's sausages and beers at Frankfurt Hall, but it's going to be an important restaurant for our company because we're going to Fishtown, and it's some risk involved. There's nothing over here at this time, Johnny Brenda's, and that's about it. And the opening, I promise you, will be an experience that you won't regret. And Greg said, well, I am interested. I just need you to know something. And I said, what's that? And he goes, I don't drink beer. I said, well, I'm not hiring you to drink the beer. I'll drink the beer. You run the business. So Greg came over and opened the restaurant. He and I and another gentleman, Josh Mann, would comprise the major part of the management team, and he did an amazing job. Not just opening that restaurant, which was incredibly successful to this day, but you could see, Greg really became a big member of the Fishtown community. Got it.
So you already knew what Greg was about. You had experience, you hired him, you were impressed by him, you gave him the opportunity. In 2019, were you following a story with Define that had been open for 3 years at this point? How many locations were there in 2000?
Well, they had Greg and Nick opened their original restaurant, which is Root. And understand that we're talking all the time. At this point, we became friends. And so, he would call me and ask me questions along the way, what I thought about this, and I would see Roland, and we would discuss the future, and it was kind of like maybe someday we can do something together. But even before then, I'm one of these guys that do these giant lists of things they want to do in their life, and somewhere along the way between 2002 and 2019, I had written that, and I always write it like it's already been done. I'd opened a Mexican restaurant with Greg Root. That was one of the things that I'd written down. Which we did.
Check.
Yep, check. So I'd written that down well before there was Root Restaurant. So there had been a lot of discussions at some point. When it was really...
so you're almost manifesting this going way back.
Oh, yeah. And we were having discussions, and it was kind of this thing where, Greg and Nick both have young families. They each have 2 young children, getting bigger quicker. But at that time, they were, babies practically. And I was earning extraordinarily well with OTG and doing great work. And so part of it was strategic of when, and they wanted to grow the company. When would it make sense that 3 families could live off the growth?
Right.
And so after Greg and Nick and Roland, they opened Soraya. They reconceptualized Root to R&D, the cocktail bar. And along that time, they'd also met Joe Badia, the true name Badia, and started to lay out the plans for the pizzeria. At that point, just looking at the financials, and they'd also won the bid to a management agreement at the Pod Hotel, where we did Condesa and El Techo. So that was also under construction. And at that point, the finances and the growth plans, and then, I think what I would bring to the table made sense for everybody.
So you were aware of what was going on back in probably 2015.
Correct.
You knew this was going to be a thing. And I think it makes sense at this point. You're more advanced in your career than the other gentlemen are. Is that safe to say, as far as tenure?
Tenure, oh, sure, yeah.
So you had the track record. You could go get picked up and get that six-figure, COO or type job. Like, you had that security in your track record. So
Yep.
it was easier for you to float your ship than these other two. I'm filling gaps right here.
No,
so
I
strategic
think,
in that sense.
No, very. I went way up, and I had the ability to come down.
Yeah. So what happened in 2019 that made them ready for you? Like, was there a goal that you guys hit, a number you hit? Like, when did you know it was, like, how did you know that this operation could float all three families?
We had several meetings and did a lot of ran a lot of numbers, looked at P&Ls, and thought about, how would we still be able to satiate investors while we grow the company, and also just get this baseline salary, call it, earnings that all three families would feel good about it. In a lot of ways, as the company was growing, Greg and Nick were coming up, and I was coming I was coming down a lot. So but I'd spent a lot of time.
What do you mean you were coming down?
In earnings.
Oh, okay.
Significant.
Yeah.
But I prepared for it, and the goal was to be, for me, this was a dream come true, because this was, I mentioned earlier, the ownership piece, great partnerships, people that I loved, that I look forward to seeing every day. All the right things about a partnership were coming together.
So I love partnerships. I'm a full believer that to be competitive in today's market, the days of the Stephen Starrs are almost going away, where you can't be the only person who owns equity in a business and expect to attract onto yourself the talent you need to be the best. There's so many amazing restaurants out there. I think it's hard to do it by yourself.
Yeah, I think I don't think it would be as much fun either.
There's goodness in that too.
Yeah, I mean, who's there to laugh at your joke?
Pie's always better when it's shared.
Right. And so, I mean, my two best friends are both entrepreneurs that have their own businesses. And they have no partners. They have kind of, they're bringing up their sons in both instances, are now their partners. But they often tell me that they envy me because I have partners that they can, we can bounce ideas off, we can argue, we can laugh, cry, cheer, goof around. And they say the toughest part of owning their own business is owning their own business when they're all alone.
Right. Greg is sitting in the room right now. We're going to be talking about him in a little bit. So I don't know, but I feel like you guys probably have a situation where there's candor in the relationship. So anything that you're about to say to him or about him right now probably has already been said to his face. Safe to say?
Probably in triplicate. Yeah. Where candor would be the understatement.
And I will tease the audience. Greg is on deck to be the next guest. So we're going to be diving deeper into the come up of Defined Hospitality in the first 3 years. But what was it? Because I noticed you guys are both operations people. And I'll be frank, like when I looked at Eli Culp specifically mentioned Al and Greg at Defined. So that was one. And then I saw there was a third partner, Derek, the executive chef.
Nick.
Oh, why did I say Derek? I'm sorry. I wrote Derek, but it's supposed to be Nick. My bad. Thank you. Sorry, Nick. We could probably edit that out. Nick, the third partner, the executive chef. Was there going to be issue with you guys getting each other's way as far as like being in the same lane? Was that an issue for you guys? Like how did you guys decide who was responsible for what?
We're still working on that. Yeah. We it's probably we're a three-headed monster in a lot of ways, and that definition of who's got what is something that we're still not great at.
But I also, at the same time, I feel like the world of operations has gotten so much more complex in restaurant. Like, it's getting more and more complex, I feel like, to be a successful restaurateur. Do you agree with that statement or not?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, it's never been more complicated and more stringent in terms of everything, rules, finances, you name it. It's intense.
Yeah.
And it's always been, at any moment, there's probably a moment in every day of my career, I'm like, man, this is intense. This is, I have a lot of, I said, jet pilots don't use rear view mirrors, but if I look over my shoulder, it's never been a time like this.
Yeah. So I guess, where does it make sense to spend the time we have left together? I mean, how many restaurants were there in 2019?
Well, we had R&D, the cocktail bar, and we had Soraya and Badia was under construction.
Got it. So since coming on board, you've opened 3 additional concepts.
Yeah. Well, really 4, because we opened the pizzeria, we opened Condesa, we opened El Techo, though they're connected and they opened somewhat simultaneously. They are 2 different concepts, just, share a kitchen, share a location. And then we opened Kalia recently in November.
Yeah. So I mentioned Nick earlier. The reason why I wanted to focus on you and Greg was because I don't speak chef.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found that chefs tend to want to talk about food a lot. And I know a lot of what has to, I mean, if you're opening a restaurant, I hope you or somebody knows how to cook, right?
Yeah,
That's
sure.
a given. Can you do everything else? And then it's really the everything else that gets me excited. So as of 2019 to today, 4 years later, what has been your focus? What makes sense for you to talk to for the rest of our time? Like, what impact have you had on Defined since coming back?
Well, I think first I would say starting right with the pizzeria is when I came in, we were ambling along with the construction and there was no real end date. And Greg and Nick picked up on this very quickly as I suggested this is we need to set a date when this construction needs to be done. We need to budget out the rest of this construction because there was no ending and there was no budget. It was build to suit. It was kind of built like Roland had built many of his other other properties. And we needed to start adding managers and chefs to run it. And, you start paying them before you open. That's just called debt. So I think that right from the get-go that I created some structure around the development of the project and a budget around the project and a timeline around the project that probably saved, I would say conservatively $250,000, if not more. And we had a date that we opened, which was probably 6 weeks to 2 months earlier than it would have if I wouldn't have started with the company.
So is it safe to say that your strengths are more in the build out and at this point you had more experience than Greg?
Yeah.
That's what you were doing with Starr and you are also doing with, that's kind of what you did is you were opening restaurants, even with Chart House. That's kind of what your thing was. So
I've opened more restaurants than Stephen Starr.
So budgeting.
Yeah.
So budgeting and just project management.
Well, remember I talked about the gentleman when I was with Cozy, corporate strategy. I developed a corporate strategy where we started to look at each pocket of the business, whether it be development, HR, our financial team, and we've changed literally all of that, every aspect of it, since I came on board. So I would say that developing a corporate strategy with Nick and Greg has been my biggest input.
So when you say corporate strategy, what are the elements? I mean, I feel like there's a lot of elements involved with that, but specifically, is it figuring out, what exactly did you do?
Well, I think that first of all, it was creating budgets for development, timelines for development, making sure we had an opening checklist, but making sure that we actually used the tool, and also taking a look at, okay, if we're going to be opening this next restaurant, what's the impact to all the other things that we do? How much more can our one accountant handle?
Yeah, like how much resources is this new restaurant going to pull from the other restaurants?
Exactly right. And then secondly, what else? It's just like crystal balling. If we do this, what's the effect to the organization? So just some smarter decisions and very collaborative. I mean, I think I I was the one that had the opportunity because Nick and Greg were super on the floor in the kitchen still to this day, to this day in a lot of ways. I was the one that was able to kind of step in fresh, not get, worry about the pita at Soraya, and put some things down in an outline for us to discuss and then act on.
Got it. What was the biggest struggle for you?
I think the biggest struggle for me was the fact that I had to learn to be 33 1/3. And
so you're still your own owner, but you're not. The buck doesn't stop at you; it stops at you and 2 other people.
Correct. And not only did I have to be 33 1/3, I also had to, respect the fact that Greg and Nick had already done some incredible heavy lifting with the opening of Soraya. So, they had they had the most sweat equity at that point. So I had to honor that sweat equity, and also, but still earn my keep and help make an impact for the organization. And Greg and Nick, they didn't start a company to get a boss. They started a company to be owners in a company. And so, me coming aboard means they had to share in that ownership. And so I think the biggest thing was for me to be really mindful and respectful of that. And so the way I do that, and what I had to learn to answer that question is, I don't speak first. I wait. I pull my punches, and I think that my volume of contribution verbally is significantly less than it would be if in different circumstances.
Yeah, first seek to understand, then seek to be understood. And I think there's a lot of power in and that's why we're getting Christine Miles on the show. We're going to be talking to her tomorrow, the author of What Is It Costing You Not to Listen? Because there's so much information you can pull just by shutting up, silencing your inner voice, and just listening and pulling in data and understanding and empathizing with the big picture. And once you have that information, once you have that data, you have more you're equipping yourself with the information to make the right choice and to make sure everyone's happy.
Yeah, absolutely. The other, cool thing, and I had to learn, was, okay, at this point now, I haven't been with Greg in operations for a while, and I'm just meeting Nick. So I had to also develop my relationship with Nick. And, Greg and I had such familiarity with each other. I had to be careful. I think there were certain times where, Greg and I were incredibly chummy together, and Nick was sort of the odd man out, even though him and Greg had been working together longer or more recently. So making sure that I was mindful that I had to build a relationship with Nick in particular was an important thing for me to pay attention to. I think one of the good news is for me was, and good fortune of working with Starr Restaurants for all that time, is I worked with a lot of really good chefs, and so I have some pretty good food chops because of it.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and so that so Nick and I had a common ground that he knew that I wasn't making it up about my comments about food, that I've worked in some kitchens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with our time together, I just want to make sure that the things that you're speaking towards are the things that you, as a representative of Define Hospitality, are uniquely positioned to speak to, because we're going to have Greg on the mic after you, and I want to make sure he's staying in his lane, you're staying in your lane. So what haven't we discussed as far as Defined, where you are today, the challenges you're having, the knowledge you would like to pay forward to the next generation of professionals?
Well, I think it's hard to sit here. I think it's almost impossible to answer that without some reflection on what we went through in the pandemic and what we learned from that.
So
and
how has that galvanized you? How are you better today because of it?
We are extraordinarily better because what we did was we also paid really close attention to that onslaught. There was a lot of negativity about our industry during that time period. And we've all heard about the big resignation, and 70, with the numbers, 75, 80% of the people left the industry, and only 20% of them returned. So we paid really close attention to what that commentary was and how we could address that for our organization. And we took some big steps, really giant steps to respond to what we were hearing. And I'd say, some of them were, sort of nuts and bolts, benefits, insurance, qualifications, vacation pay,
Front of house, back of house, equity.
all those things, and made significant improvements in all of those instances. And none of our pro formas for these restaurants or investment pro formas were built upon those decisions that we made, but we made them knowing we wanted to be different.
Yeah.
We wanted to be ahead of the curve.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then we also knew that we needed to invest in our managers and our chefs in a different way as well.
Okay.
And our presence is significant in the restaurants. People have great access to us, but we also kind of looked at it and said, what kind of leadership training are they getting really? Really? And we can be accessible. So we actually, pardon me one sec, we sought out a company called 1 Degree that is a leadership training company. And we, in a time where money couldn't have been tighter, we thought it was a really smart move to invest in them. And we developed a leadership training program for all of our chefs and managers that they attend each month. And it's so exhilarating, quite frankly, to come to these meetings because everybody's there, all of our managers and all of our chefs from all of our restaurants in one room, and going through a lot of skill training, everything from conflict resolution to how to run a pre-shift and how to read people, how to dial your communication for certain people's style of learning. We've delved into many things, and the goal was simple. A, it's going to make our organization better. B, if someone leaves our company for whatever reason to go to their own business, whatever, our goal was that we wanted them to look back over their time with us and say, hey, I benefited from working with Define Hospitality. I'm glad I worked with those guys.
I've noticed too that when you take the time to invest in your people, develop these skills, inject culture, values into them, when it is time for them to go on and do their own thing, you're more than likely to be a part of that with them. Why go do your own thing when you could do something with us? Is that something that you've done, or is there so you talked about leadership. We got here by talking about how you're investing in your leadership and your management. One of the things you're doing is the training and the education they're getting. But we also talked about insurance and all this other stuff and benefits and things like this. Are you doing profit sharing, anything along those lines?
We haven't got to profit sharing. I mean, we have we have debt.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to dial in profit sharing when we're paying down debt and investors, and so. But I think that we feel really good about where we are on all compensation levels.
Got it.
Feel really good.
Got it. So just paying your people a livable wage.
Yeah, I think we were one of the first restaurants, if not the first in Philadelphia, to add a kitchen service charge to every check. And so the idea there is we wanted the back of the house we wanted to try to even out the long-standing disparity, and also incentivize everyone that works in kitchens to, if the restaurant's busier, they make more. And so by instituting the service charge, 3% on every check, if you work a Saturday night, you're going to make more money than you do if you work a Monday night.
Right.
And it made a big difference in a lot of people's lives. And, we've had a handful of customers have pushed back on it, but we stood by it because it was needed.
You know what? You're bringing up something right now. I'm going to echo the mission statement: to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. But full-heartedly, I believe my mission with this podcast is to change the world, because I believe that if you change the restaurant industry changes the world. And this is a perfect example of that. We need to be better about educating the consumer and asking from the consumer what we need to run a normal business. Our business model is effed up, man. And it's effed up because of us. We effed it up because we just took it all the time. Like we always paid it forward to the consumer. We always made that's what we do in hospitality. We're generous. We're always the last to benefit. And whatever's left over is what we take. And that fundamental mindset, you got to charge the consumer what it costs to run the business. It's a transaction. What does it take? Charge the consumer. And we're afraid to charge the consumer. What's going through your mind?
That is, wow. That is exactly the conversations we've had. And, I have this, 30 some year history, and it's amazing to me that If you look at what you said is so right on. We're still charging and paying people the same way we were 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And the customer will still complain about it. So you have two choices: either go do something else or reinvent it.
Yeah.
And I think that, our new motto, our new thought about pricing, we're not like willy-nilly or arrogant about it. We have to deliver a great product. So this really energizes us to be great and run a great restaurants. And our customers, God bless them, have been responding to what we've been putting out there. At the same time, we have to charge what it takes to fulfill the needs of the investors, or there's no company, to pay staff in a way that is meaningful so they can achieve goals in their lives. And then, of course, be able to feed our own families and be paid for our efforts. I mean, we're opening a restaurant right now. And I'll say to people, how many hours do you think I work on a restaurant before it opens? We don't get paid for that. And when we hire chefs and managers and start opening that restaurant, that is part of our debt. So the onus on a restaurant to perform when it opens is incredibly intense. And I think that I said people's the priority with us.
That's literally what I was just thinking.
And so we're very, very willing to balance those relationships now, where they were imbalanced. The customer's always right. They're always negotiating this or negotiating that. We are going to love our customer. We're going to provide a great experience for them. We're going to treat them with respect, but we're going to charge them what we need to fulfill all those other obligations for all the people. And we're also doing work in communities where we're making a difference by taking rundown warehouses. And when you see our next project, you'll see again that we're loving something back to life that is historical, that no one wanted to touch with a 10-foot pole. And we need to charge what it's worth.
Yeah.
Or you know what? We can all be proud of it, but it's no good if it's out of business.
And this is what I believe in when I say like the restaurant industry has the power to change the world, because most of the privileged people have the ability to spend money on these. It's not just food, it's service, it's experience. We're providing so much more than a meal. And I think the other variable that's worth taking into consideration is we pay approximately 10% less now than we did like 100 years ago on food. People spend less money on food. Like it's like 9% now of total income goes towards food, where it used to be like over 20%. So I think there needs to be a shift in values in society where we take the money from the privilege and we it's a trickle down, and that money goes back into communities and providing opportunities for people. It's a great vehicle for change. Yeah.
And there's another thing to think about. And I always, used to say this even to Stephen Starr when he's getting criticism. You were saying it seems like, the busier he got and the wealthier he got, the more criticism he took. Well, look at how many artisans and artists and people he put to work. We're doing the same thing. Yeah. There's woodworkers and steel workers and artists, and they're putting in, our horticulturists are putting in a new flower arrangements right next door at Soraya in our garden. They're beautiful. So all these people that have these professions that are their passion, we're employing also.
Yeah.
And all of that. But ultimately, there's only one person that pays, and that's the customer.
Right.
And we've got to charge them for all that.
Exactly. Yes.
And I, that's what makes me extraordinarily proud to be in the restaurant industry, because it touches so many of the trades.
Yes.
So many of the artisans, so many of the farmers. The list is endless.
And we want to start profiling more of those people on the road, because there is so much adjacent industry aside the restaurant industry. Like it's not just food and beverage, it's designers. Where your designer was in here. It's all these talented people that spin off opportunity for so many different verticals.
Yeah.
We've got to wrap it up because I want to respect your time. We're not going to do a speed round. I'll let Greg do the speed round for you. I do want to go on record in saying I have nothing wrong with Stephen Starr. When I said the statement, the days of the Stephen Starrs are over, meaning I don't think you can do it alone anymore. I don't think there can be just one owner, and I don't think you can achieve the same level of success that Stephen has achieved by yourself in today's market. Because I think the only way to get the talent is to offer equity.
Yeah.
I believe that statement.
Well, I didn't take it negatively, your comment about Stephen.
Cool.
I actually took it. I think he would take it as a compliment, because that's how I took it.
Yeah.
I thought it was.
Right.
I thought it was just more of a sign
just
of.
making sure.
No, I think it was more of a commentary on how you're seeing the industry and how intense it is, and and the support that's needed.
Right.
Even you look at it. Why am I here with Define Hospitality? On scale, there's 3 operators here now, but make no mistake, that's what's making it tick.
Right. This is where we have to wrap it up. I want to respect your time. Before I do say goodbye officially, I ask all my guests before we say goodbye, who do you respect and admire? I'm really trying to take Restaurant Unstoppable into a journalistic area where I'm letting the industry decide who we're making an example of, paying attention to what you're saying, picking up the breadcrumbs as they're being dropped. So who do you think we should make an example of on the show?
Well, it's tough for me to say.
I'll take multiple.
I'm going to take 2. I'm going to give you 2 people that are top of mind with me right now in the industry. One is Amanda Schulman over at Her Place Supper Club. I think what she's doing is so gutsy and so just bravado, but in a way that is all about the team. And it's called Her Place, and it's a really interesting one. Her and I have talked about it. But she's just a little badass. She works her butt off. She cares about her people. She cares about the industry. She just cares.
Is it a membership model of Supper Club?
No, it's not. It's and she's a James Beard nominee. And also she has a real vision that she wants her restaurant to be in Center City because she wants to help Center City come back. My partner, Chef Nook, our partner at Kalia, is just another amazing woman. If you follow her story from growing up in Thailand to where she is now, is just another person that really resonates with me because she brings it every night. She's just wonderful, hardworking. She is so proud of her Thai culture and through her food, and honoring her family and her mother through her work, but also a pillar in the community. Do anything for anybody at any time. It's just so proud to have her as a partner, and for us, for the restaurant to be absolutely getting the acclaim that it is through a lot of hard work. So these are 2 people that are kind of that are inspiring me right now.
Beautiful, and that's Chef Amanda Schulman and Chef Nook.
Yeah.
Look out, ladies. I'm coming after you. I'd love to get you on the show. And how do we connect? If we were inspired by today's story and maybe want to come join your team, maybe we want to be a part of an organization that has the amount of integrity that you guys are putting into Defined Hospitality, how do we connect?
Text me at 215-680-1345.
Awesome.
Literally, it's the quickest way.
Al, this has been a lot of fun, my friend. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, your knowledge, your perspectives. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable.
All righty. I appreciate the time. I'm very humbled to be here, and shout out to Eli for even recommending me because he is another person that is just makes our industry unstoppable.
Yeah, what he's doing to lift up Philadelphia, sharing knowledge is really great. Tip to the hat. Eli, we'll wrap it there, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Awesome. Well done.